Welcome to the T.A.C. show, episode 1. Today with our first guest, former Lansing townsperson Kelly Cheatham, living now currently in Texas.
Yes, I am.
So, how have you been doing lately?
I've been good. I just had the opportunity to drive all the way back to New York and drive all the way back to Texas. So lots of traveling lately, but otherwise I'm good.
I bet you it was the quickest drive around.
If 23 and a half hours is quick, then sure.
Oh, you could fit nearly an entire day.
I could. The whole no sleep thing would be a challenge.
It's not like running all the way to Indonesia and back on foot.
That's true.
Running
That's
through
true. It's
the
not
water.
quite as far.
Yeah.
That's funny. Oh, goodness. Yeah. How have you been?
Oh, I've been doing pretty well. So, what was it like when you transitioned from New York to Texas? How many years ago was it, and what was it like?
So let me do some math here. I think I've been here for about 2.5 years. So at the very beginning, there was a lot of culture shock, but I guess not as much as some people would say. So when you hear Texas as a New Yorker, most people have kind of a preconceived notion of what that means. And I did as well. And I will tell you that living in Texas is not as different as I thought it was going to be because I'm from small town New York. So small town rural New York, not that far off from Texas, but definitely still some culture shock. So that part's taken some time to get over.
What made you want to move to Texas in the first place?
That's the age-old question. It wasn't the state itself.
An age-old question.
Yes, I get that question
2 years ago is
all
not
the
an
time.
age-old question.
Say that again?
2 years ago is not an age-old question.
It feels like it. The number of times I've been asked that question, it feels very age-old. Everybody I come across in Texas wants to know, why did I move from, I guess New York to Texas, although technically I moved from Virginia to Texas.
Yeah, not as old as Paul McCartney being asked over and over again, why did the Beatles break up?
Touche. Well, give it some time. Maybe I'll reach that level of age-old. We'll see. But yeah, no, why did I move to Texas? I was living in Virginia, and I loved living in Virginia, but I was ready to try something different, something new. And I'm the kind of person who needs to surround herself with people who I feel comfortable with. So either my family or my adopted family, people that I've kind of adopted as family. And so I had that adopted family here. I had a couple of friends who had moved down here the year before, and I decided to give it a try. So I don't really have a great reason, but now I'm in Texas.
Like, is there a main difference between teaching in New York versus teaching in Texas?
There's a lot of differences. Now, I never officially taught in New York. I substitute taught. I went to school in New York, but I didn't actually teach in New York.
But were you a
Virginia.
Student teacher? Like, when are you a
I
student
did do
teacher?
student teaching. Yes, that's true. Yes, for sure.
But that's still teaching, right?
Yeah, still teaching, but it's still a different perspective. I don't think as a student teacher, you get the full picture of what it's like. But kind of based on what I know and based on what I experienced in New York, the biggest difference is the amount of stress put on testing. And so in Texas, we're very, very concerned with test scores. And that drives the funding of our schools in Texas very much. So therefore, that's kind of the big stressor here. And that was very different than what I experienced in Virginia and from what I remember experiencing in New York.
So Texas is more focused on tests?
It feels that way, yes. I don't know how much of that is related to, so in New York, there's a really, really strong teachers union that has a lot of power. And therefore, I think that they kind of ease that stress a little bit, they have the power to do that. And that's not the case in Texas. We don't have a strong teachers union that has a lot of power. And so there's no buffer between what the state wants and expects from teachers and what teachers can do and would like to do. So
Are you
be
currently part of a union now that you're in Texas? Or do you have like some
I
affiliate?
am. I'm part of the teachers union. But like I said, we don't have a lot of power. So the union itself can't really do a whole lot to defend a teacher, not nearly as much as what the union in New York does. So, yep.
Oh yeah, I go to my school. I see a bunch of teachers having all these union signs. I'm a union member. It's all around.
Yeah, and I don't think it's as common in Texas for teachers to be part of a union. In New York, everybody's part of the union.
Yeah.
A little different.
What got you into teaching? Like, was there anybody notable like in this community that really inspired your passion to go out and teach people?
Absolutely. So the first memory I have of thinking I'm going to be a teacher when I grow up was actually in first grade. And so I had kind of a weird and unique experience in elementary school. When I was in kindergarten, I had Mrs. Morse in kindergarten, which that name might ring a bell for some of our older listeners. And I was in her class for about 3/4 of the year, and then I moved to first grade. So I spent a quarter of the year in first grade, and that was a really hard transition for me. But I remember distinctly my first grade teacher, Mrs. Frame, Sue Frame, Lansing native. She made that transition so much easier. And I have such a positive memory of that experience. And I remember coming out of that thinking, I want to be just like Mrs. Frame. And so that's what inspired me to be a teacher. Now that was in first grade. So obviously over time, that kind of idea of what a teacher is and what a teacher does was shaped by other teachers. And so I have really fond memories of some of those other teachers who really inspired me. I remember I had Mrs. Schwartz in 8th grade math, and she made me love math. And then that kind of continued through high school with some of my math teachers in high school. And that's what made me decide that I wanted to teach math specifically. And that was really influential to me as well.
Yeah. So you teach primary school students, or you teach the secondary grades?
So first off, I am not currently teaching students, but when I was teaching students, I have taught 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. So kind of that upper elementary level.
You don't want to deal with a bunch of crazy, rambunctious teenagers. The next thing you know, you're trying to teach them algebra. The next thing you know, they're spray painting their car, saying school sucks.
So I never had that experience. The highest grade that I officially kind of taught, I was a student teacher, taught 8th grade, and that's the highest I went. And that was too high for me. It's just different. I feel like I connect really well with that kind of upper elementary group of kids. I also love the little ones, but I can't imagine having the patience to teach the little ones. So I like to watch them walk down the hallway and things like that, but I wouldn't want to be the one leading that line.
So is your Texas community, is it like very liberal community, or is it more conservative side?
When it comes to, I guess it depends on who you're comparing to. When we're comparing to Lansing, New York, or Ithaca, New York, we're definitely more conservative in Fort Worth, Texas. But when it comes to comparing across the state of Texas, Fort Worth is on the more liberal side. I think we're still technically red. Our city is still red, but we came pretty close.
Did a lot of your people more vote for Ted Cruz, or did they vote for Beto?
Definitely Ted Cruz as a whole here, but I think Beto had a stronger following here than he did in a lot of other places in Texas. So yeah, a little different. But I will tell you, that was kind of one of the biggest misconceptions I had coming to Texas. I thought that I was moving to a state where everybody was going to be a Republican, everybody was going to vote red, and everybody was going to have those kind of stereotypical beliefs of the Republican Party, and that's not what I found. I have surrounded myself with people who are very open-minded, and I was surprised to find that here.
So did you vote for somebody different in the primary election than you did for the main election?
I actually did, yes. But I was on the fence in the primaries, so I wasn't really sure what to do there. I
You
don't know
vote
that
for
I was
Yang?
as educated as I should have been about the candidates at that point in time. I did not.
What about Bernie?
I voted for Bernie.
What made you want to vote for Bernie and stuff?
I think his message about change. I was so fed up with everything that was happening in our nation at the time. I wanted to vote for somebody who had that strong message of we need everything to change, and I was ready for that. But I also kind of knew that a lot of his ideas were too radical for the majority of the nation, and therefore I kind of went into it knowing he probably wasn't going to be the Democratic candidate moving forward. But I kind of aligned myself to a lot of his ideas of change.
Do you think many people say he's not able to properly compromise on these issues, and he doesn't focus too much on what to do with foreign policy and America's role as a world power? What do you think of that?
I don't know that it's an issue with. I don't know that he should compromise on a lot of the things that he feels strongly about. But I guess as a whole, I think if we're thinking about the health of our nation and the ability for our nation to move forward, we needed somebody who was going to be able to bring in some of those Republican voters as well. And he was not the candidate for that. So I don't know for sure whether he'd be able to compromise, but I also don't know that he should on a lot of his issues, at least.
Yeah. So, yeah, because the thing is that the president, that he might have had to compromise, because usually it's like the president's usually in its like first 2 years, the House or Senate is like Democratic, but then the next 2 years it flips around just like that. You look at that, what happened with Obama, that's what happened with Trump. So halfway through Bernie's term, like on a lot of those issues, you'd most likely have to find a compromise.
That's true. You're right. That is true. I guess that is an interesting skill set that we need to look for in a president, somebody who is willing to fight for the things that matter, but also is able to find a way to, I guess, persuade people who don't believe in that. And that's definitely a challenge. As
a senator, you can probably make more change, since the president is basically a stamper and an army general, and also somewhat an ambassador to other countries as a leader. Mm-hmm. That's the main role broken down is he doesn't make his own laws. He doesn't get us into war. He sort of like promotes America. He's supposed to represent what America is, and he basically approves or disapproves, and then he makes major decisions for army.
That's true. That's very true.
Do you feel
an interesting way to put it?
Do you feel that these days, like, people are so sort of getting unfair with Donald Trump's criticisms? Like, I know some of the stuff he's done is just not right, but do you feel that sometimes people have gotten too far?
I think that a lot of the things that we criticize it's all driven by the media. And therefore, the things that the media is focusing on, they're the negatives at this point. And so, yeah, I mean, I feel like there are probably some positive things that he's not getting enough support for, or I guess support's the word, because we're so focused on the negative, and therefore the criticisms are really strong. So yeah, maybe he's not getting a fair shake a lot of times, but at the same time, in my mind, if I had to prioritize the things that I look for in a president, human rights and the ability to just treat people with basic respect is number one for me. And he's not doing that. And therefore, I don't feel bad, I guess is what I'm saying there. If you're not going to be just a good human being, then don't think that you should be supported.
Yeah, can you believe he just pardoned Roger Stone and that guy who bought the ostrich jacket and a bunch of people who killed Iraqis? It's crazy since Ben Shapiro, Tucker Carlson, they're not talking about this.
They're not.
It's not like a partisan issue. Like what he's doing is like flat out wrong.
Yeah, and that's the scary part about the power that he, or not even just him, just the president in general has over the media. It's really scary because that's where most people get their information. And
it's worse than the pardons Clinton did back 19 years ago.
Yeah, for sure. And I will say a lot of the other media outlets, though, are focusing on it. And so it depends on which media you're watching.
Oh, I watch all types.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's good. You should be well balanced. So,
Did you ever dream of becoming an athlete, like in high school?
I don't think I ever really did. I loved sports, in soccer in particular. I loved it, but I knew that was not in the cards for me pretty early on. I was never like a rock star, and so I knew that wasn't going to be my future. And even as a kid, I don't remember really having that as a dream, because I think that's when you hear it most is from, usually it's the upper elementary school students who have just discovered a passion in sports, and that's what they want to be when they grow up. So I would say at least half of my students through the years that I taught would say I want to be a professional.
That woman should be on the main NBA team, not on a WNBA. Like, should they be together? Because do you think height determines your skills in basketball?
Oh, that's a tough question. I mean, do I think it should happen? Maybe. Do I think it will happen? No. I think, I don't know. The women's basketball game and the men's basketball game are so different. I just can't imagine. I can't imagine them being the same, I guess. If you watch a professional women's basketball game,
I've only watched one briefly. They don't really air them too much. Like I've only watched like a women's football game very briefly too. It just seems like they over prioritize a lot of the men's sports.
They absolutely do. I mean, you're right. It's hard to flip through the channels and find a women's sports game on, but I mean, every other channel is some sort of men's professional sports game. So you are absolutely right about that. But if you do have the opportunity to kind of watch a men's versus a women's game of the same sport, there are a lot of differences in how it's played. I think in a lot of the women's games, my opinion is that a lot of the decisions that the players are making are more analytical and kind of thought out. Men's games tend to be a little bit faster. Oh, my headphones just died, so you're gonna have to go without headphones from me. 1 sec.
Okay.
Oh no.
That's okay. Can you hear me at all?
Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, of course I can hear you.
Okay, awesome. I had to go in and change my speakers.
No, it's fine.
Okay. I think we're good.
How come you did like at the final quarter of kindergarten? How come you did like go in first grade? Like,
that's a great question. So I am so grateful for this. I have an older brother, Dan, who is
I've met Dan.
Yeah, so he's 2 years ahead of me in school, or he was. And so he went through kindergarten, and while he was going through kindergarten, his kindergarten teacher, whose name I can't recall right now, I'll have to think about that one, but she gave essentially the entire kindergarten curriculum to my mom. And so while he was going through kindergarten, I was essentially going through kindergarten too. And so I got all of the skills kind of practiced and mastered before I started kindergarten. And so when I did begin kindergarten, my parents kind of fought to move me up to first grade because I was ready. And it was a challenging fight, but in the end, it was the right decision for me. And so um, that's why that happened. But it did take a long time to make that decision. And that's why it didn't happen until the very end.
Some of these kids who are really smart in my class, they either get a lot of help or they went to like private schools. Like they learned everything way faster. Stuff we learned by like the time I'm 11, 12 years old, they learned by the time they're about 9, 8 years old. And
Mhm.
so by the time I'm already in 7th grade, they already know how to do algebra pretty well.
Yeah, that is
And
true.
I'm just surprised like there's a big population in like in my grade who are in like advanced classes, like 10, 15%. I just find it interesting.
It's hard. I think our public school system is so stretched because while you have students that are like that in your grade who are ready for all of the advanced classes, you also have students who continue to struggle. And every year, that kind of gap grows and grows and grows. And so public school teachers, they're kind of restricted based on, state laws and everything. They have to find a way to teach both of those kind of student populations.
The,
And it's not easy.
the curriculum should be at a local level. The people, since we, the students, are basically the future taxpayers of this town, and our parents pay taxes. They pay many thousands of dollars every year. They should help create alongside the board to help create standards for our county. And instead of doing this at an entire state level, just do it at a smaller county level. So teachers have more freedom to educate, and there will be less of a gap.
I mean, I agree with that. I think the counter argument there, though, is an issue with equity. And so you're dealing with local populations who are wealthier, and therefore the students in that population have more opportunities. And if you're tailoring the curriculum to them, they have a leg up. But in other communities where that's not the case, you're now tailoring the curriculum to them. When they reach adulthood, now we're comparing these two populations and we have a huge gap between them. And so I think the goal with the statewide standards is to kind of level that playing field just a little bit. So that's, I think, the counter argument. But I think that the whole idea of grade levels should be thrown out. I think that would be an interesting solution to the problem. I think students should master the standards before they're able to move on. That's not the case.
Would you? Well, really? Well, you must have some type of. You should have like a K to 8 or a K to 12, since I wouldn't want my little kindergarten age son to be next to a stinky 17-year-old senior.
Well, for sure, there's definitely going to have to be some. I don't know what that's going to look like, but some sort of system there in place. But the idea of just pushing a student along because they're of age doesn't make sense, because by the time that student gets to 8th grade, that gap has grown so much. Why not hold that student back and teach them the skills and standards that are needed at the time? So, I don't know, just food for thought.
I think that kindergarten, like, I didn't really learn too much in kindergarten. Like, wasn't until 1st grade. Like, 1st grade and 2nd grade, we learned things slowly. But then it seemed that when I was in 3rd and 4th grade, they just pushed everything super hard, and it was an insane rate. It was a really hard transition, and it was sort of a weird like culture shock. Since, do you think to solve the problem they should make 1st or 2nd grade and like make them focus more on mathematics, like have an equilibrium of both mathematics and like English language arts?
I think the challenge is that when you are in kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade, you are learning to read, right? That is the goal. And then when you get into those upper grades, you are reading to learn, right? It switches a little bit. You've learned the basics of reading, but now you're using that knowledge to learn. And so when we apply that to math, if we kind of increase the rigor in kindergarten, first and second grade, which I'm not saying we shouldn't do, but we also need to get students to the point where they can read in math, because reading in math is just as important as actually doing the calculation.
Yeah, but I do that in later grade, because math should go alongside, since it's basically reading too. It's like its own language. You could show I have one ball, I'm adding another ball, and now I have two balls.
For sure. Yeah, I think the reason why for you those younger grades seemed super easy compared to those later elementary grades is because in those younger grades you're learning the foundational skills. So you were learning, like, what does the equal sign mean, in math? What does that mean? And if you don't have those foundational skills, then you're not going to be able to master what's coming in third and fourth grade. Now you came in with those foundational skills. I don't know how difficult they were for you to learn back in kindergarten, first and second grade. I mean, I knew you back then and you were a very smart kid. So I think it also helps that your parents are really supportive of your education. So you kind of had that unique perspective that not all students have.
Both my grandpas never even completed school. They both dropped out after 8th grade.
Yeah, I mean, that was common back then.
Do you think that you can make it today as a successful adult when you're married with kids? Do you think if you're just the breadwinner of the family, do you think you could survive well and do well without a college degree?
I mean, I couldn't do what I'm doing now without a college degree. Are there other
are there other ways to lead a good life without some form of college education these days?
I agree. There's a lot of really awesome kind of technical skills that I could have had, and I could have taken those into a different career path for sure, and probably would have done very well for myself. But it's not what I wanted to do. So that's kind of the difference there.
Do you think that people could also succeed today if they never completed high school?
Honestly, probably not. In today's world, I think that we have, and that's a societal issue, not so much an educational issue. We have so many expectations, and not just in the job field, but in the rest of life, where you need to have successfully, learn to read and have a well-balanced, well-rounded education, that make it so that it would be difficult without a high school degree.
Yeah, because I don't know if my dad could have lived the life he lived today if his father never had a high school degree today, and if his mother just had a part-time job and his dad was a freelance boiler worker. I wonder if that could happen today if you lived with one brother and they lived in an apartment, if it'd be the same today compared to 45 years ago.
I don't think it is. I think our society now has shifted so much into this kind of professional world where it's not so much skills based, it is very much knowledge based. And so I think we've shifted so far as a society that it would be really difficult to survive in that way.
Do you think colleges should pay taxes? Because the thing is that that since their education, they say they don't have their 501c, they don't have to pay taxes. Yet their primarily thing is for profit. They earn tuition, they get grants and donations and billions of dollars. These scholarships for students are expensive. Even if you don't do a scholarship, the tuition is $65,000 for an entire year. That's more than what people make without taxes in the course of 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, that's something I've never really thought about. I don't know. I think also there's a difference between a private institution and a public institution. But I'm not sure how I feel about colleges being required to pay taxes.
Do you think Harvard should be able to pay taxes? They're a famous school that earns lots of monies. Anybody who wants to be extremely successful in business or IT or as a lawyer or medicine all want to go to Harvard.
Mm-hmm. I think the challenge is you can't just designate certain schools. At some point, you're going to have to figure out which schools are you requiring to pay taxes and which aren't. Otherwise, you're going down an interesting path there. But I don't know. I mean, I would need to I would need to educate myself a little bit more on, what does Harvard do with the money that's coming in, to see how I
Have
feel
you
about that.
have you ever gone to an Ivy League college?
I haven't. I wanted to, but I haven't. I never actually applied, which I regret. I do. Not that I would have gone, but I just wanted to know whether I could get in.
Colleges overpressure their students to over succeed and to become famous people.
I'm sure there's a lot of that, just because when you graduate with the name Cornell on your resume, there are expectations. And so they want to uphold their reputation. So I'm sure that there's a lot of expectations that these
'Cause I
Ivy League
know
schools are holding people to.
I know a Cornell bachelor's is like the way to go. Like, I don't know too many people who actually want to go get their master's at Cornell, but many people I know want to go start out, get their bachelor's at Cornell, and then go to something like Harvard or Yale or
Mhm.
Penn State.
Yeah. I don't know. That's interesting. It's also interesting because I came from a career path that doesn't really value where you go to school. I know that that's important in a lot of careers, having the name Cornell on your resume, but in education, it's that's not as important.
Yeah.
So it's a
Well,
different perspective.
how long did you go to college for?
So I went 4 years to Syracuse University and got my bachelor's, and then I went 2 years to the University of Delaware and got my master's. So
Oh,
6 total years.
it's at Syracuse. Did you go and fight the Minotaur?
I did not. That was not an activity that was promoted. No.
What about like finding and opening up the Trojan horse and the big orange Trojan horse?
Again, that was not listed in the extracurricular catalog. Nope. I spent a whole lot of time in the library.
Is Syracuse's university like as good with basketball as it seems? Like every time I turn on Spectrum cable, it always is like Big Orange, Syracuse. Wait for the Big Orange. The Big Orange leads again. You got all this orange basketball.
Well, I think that's because it's local, and therefore, like there are claim to fame when it comes to the basketball world. But I will tell you, it's not. They're not as good as they used to be. So we're clinging to something. They were awesome back even before I got there. They were like the team, and I don't think that's the case anymore, which is sad. But
Can you? Is it that loud?
well, I can hear it, and Shadow can hear it. So Shadow's over here looking out the window, trying to figure out where that's coming from.
Oh, yeah, well, everybody's got dogs.
That's funny. Oh
Or
gosh.
maybe I secretly had part in listening to a canine radio where a puppy
It does.
dog.
His bark is very repetitive and like even, and so it could be a recording. That's funny. Oh. Oh, Angus. That's too funny.
Oh, what was it like voting in your election? So you first voted in the election of 2008, right?
I did. Oh my God, I don't even remember it.
Were you surprised Obama made it that far?
No, I think at that time I was really hopeful. I think I was also really naive to, I guess, the rest of the nation. I still feel that way. I did not know that there was any reason not to believe that he'd get that far. But I think over the years since then, I've learned a lot about what the rest of the nation thinks and feels, and so that's kind of been eye-opening. But no, at the time, I didn't think there was any other option. So I don't know.
Do you think Obama won because he came in at the right time, right? Like the right time, because you were going into 2008, like you were having a recession, the Iraq War was lingering on, everybody were realizing it didn't really have anything to do with 9/11. People weren't getting happy with that. The Afghan war was still on. House prices were getting high. There was a recession. Enron's debt were getting still bothering people. You had Bernie Madoff getting arrested. Many companies losing lots of money. Like that must have like, and he did is that he just like his supporters tried to say he did the right decision, but he just literally funded corporations, put money back into them instead of creating stimuluses, right?
Yeah, I definitely think that he came in at the right time. I think the nation was ready for change. He was offering that.
Because like in his first 2 years, it had quite well. He had like Obamacare.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that your community to this day is still affected by Obamacare? Like, how does it help with your health care?
So it doesn't help with mine because I have healthcare through my employer. But I know others who have either in the past had Obamacare or have whatever version we have now. So I know others who have been affected by it, and I've only heard positive things. So I haven't heard the other perspective, and therefore I don't really understand it.
Yeah. So what exactly did happen with the drone strike, Obama's drone strike?
I have no idea.
Oh, okay.
You're asking the tough questions.
No, I go a little bit. I'm not trying to go too hard. I'm not
That's
asking
good.
about the NSA or anything like that.
Oh gosh, yeah. No.
One time I was with this old lady at a store. She was like looking at the security cameras, randomly talking to me. Hey, we look at look at those security cameras. If they watch us all the time, we should have something to go watch to them. And I told him that we can't do that because of the NSA. And she's like, hey, my son's in the NSA. He's an astronaut.
Oh, that's adorable. That's really funny.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness. Technology. It's confusing to a lot of people.
What do you think life will be like in 20 years? Do you think we're just gonna like have really smart AIs do everything for us, and we're gonna just go around virtual reality?
I think there's going to be a lot more of that, but I think that there's still so much fear around AI, and the idea of it kind of replacing
Yeah,
in some way humankind. And so I don't know that we're not going to be in a world full of it. No, I think there's going to be more of it, but it's not going to dominate our world.
top-notch scientists. Like we're watching this video about this really old guy, and he was like 102-year-old English physicist. He's pretty good for like 100 something years old, and he thinks that AI will become the next dominant race.
That's terrifying.
Yeah. To be honest, George Orwell, his book 1984 predicted a world aided heavily by national security and personal freedom and privacy taken away just to ensure peace.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it didn't happen in the 80s, but he was about 17 years off. But these days, I feel that like in good 20 years, the full vision of Big Brother could actually happen.
We'll see. I think it's going to depend on the next few years and how things shake up. And I don't know. It's kind of scary to think about. And it's not that far away. That's the scariest part. 20 years.
Do you ever like feel freaked out knowing that at any moment, if you said something controversial, all of a sudden your phone could have like automatically started recording without you knowing it, the audio around you and your stuff?
Yeah.
Sent to the government?
I mean, I don't have that fear. In the back of my mind, I know that's a possibility, but I don't have the time to be concerned about that all the time. But it's interesting, like when you talk to my parents, for example, like they're much more aware and concerned about that than I am. Just in general, like they're not very trustworthy of technology because of kind of those fears being instilled in them. And for me, it's just my life now. I know that there's technology all around me, and I'm just gonna roll with it.
Because they're baby boomers, right? They grew up with counterculture in Vietnam antitrust, the government, back when the Watergate, they all grew up during that, right?
Yeah. So I guess their lives have been shaped differently than mine.
Yeah, because are they the younger baby boomers, like mom's age, or are they the older ones from like the early 50s, early mid 50s?
So I think I'm looking up, when did the baby boomers actually start?
Well, they're from
They're later.
45 to 65.
They're later. They're closer to the. My mom was born in 59. My dad was born in 60.
So they grew up as, when they were around my age, they had to deal with the end of the Vietnam War, the disco era. They had to grow up with Watergate, man. They had to grow up with high oil prices, the Iranian hostage crisis, and like Gerald Ford pardoning Richard Nixon. It all makes sense.
Well, it's interesting, like all of those things shaped who they are today, and we're able to kind of look back on that and analyze it because that was in the past. But it makes you wonder, 20 years down the road, who's going to be analyzing your past and like figuring out how that has shaped you.
I don't know, internet historians who use the Wayback Machine.
I guess so. It's just, it's an interesting thought, though. Man, oh man, we've gone through a lot you're much younger than me, but just in our time on Earth, a lot has happened. So
16 years. Random stuff like go making toast or.
It's interesting. This whole students who are virtually learning, it's just so different because that's something that you can't do in class. You can't be like, you're lecturing too long, sir. I'm gonna go.
Well, I'm gonna go
make some toast.
Well, you see, making toast is actually the most important part of class. You see, you've got to go up. You see, you're incorporating physical education by going up, walking out, getting the bread. Then you're timing the bread. You're timing the bread as the toaster goes down. You know what heat it is. You have to use the dial. Remember how long it is plugged in for. And then it's science related because the toaster cooks the toast.
Yeah.
And then mathematically, with an angle-shaped butter at a certain degree, you have to spread the butter across the toast equally, then divide it into half, and then go put it on a plate equally, math, and then use physical education again to go back and eat toast while looking at your phone notifications, which is English language arts. And then you've already, as you see, toast is the most important part of a school day. And you see, it all makes sense.
Cross-curricular connection right there. Oh gosh, that's funny. I mean, you're not wrong.
Yes. Well, anyway, thanks for talking. Thanks for doing this first episode. I'm gonna put this on YouTube. I'm gonna put this on Spotify. And I'm gonna plan to do one episode every Saturday around this time with a new guest.
Love it. I'm honored to be your first guest.
Oh yeah.
Well, so fun.
Well, anyway, thanks for talking, and make sure to tune in for next episode.
All right. See you later.
See you later.